The Bronze Age signalled the dawn of human civilization, a time of growth, prosperity, and of wondrous monuments built to commemorate the boons of the ages. But history rolls on, and it's now time for a new challenge, building fantastic new innovations and leading your armies in the Iron Age. Roll Through the Ages, the Iron Age, is the anticipated follow-up to Matt Leacock's award-winning Roll Through the Ages. Crafted by Tom Lehman, designer of Race for the Galaxy and Pandemic on the Brink, the Iron Age takes Roll Through the Ages into the time of empires. Players will not only have to gather food and goods for the prosperity of their people, they will also have to build ports, provinces, monuments, and amass great armies to wage war against barbarians and other players' tribes. Roll Through the Ages, the Iron Age, is typically played over 6 to 8 rounds. In each round, players will use the Empire and Fate dice to determine the actions that they may take to advance their civilizations. The Empire dice will show what specific actions that player may take, while the Fate die will often allow a player to modify those actions in some way. Players begin the game with 3 food, 1 good, and either a port or a province. Provinces provide immediate benefits but require food, while ports increase the number of goods a player will earn during dice rolls. The starting player takes 2 Empire dice and the Fate die and makes the first roll. When a player rolls the dice, they set aside any die showing a skull. The player may then re-roll any remaining dice, again setting aside any showing a skull. The player may then re-roll remaining dice a 3rd time if he chooses. The player then resolves the dice in the order of actions. The first action is to collect goods. For any die showing a port, the player advances his goods by 1. This is also true for any skulls rolled. Next, a player collects food, gaining food equal to the number of food icons indicated on the rolled dice. In the case of the goods or population die face, the player must choose either 2 goods or 2 population. The Fate die, and some developments, can modify the amount of food collected. Next, a player must feed his provinces. For each province in the Empire, a player subtracts 1 food from his supply. If there is not enough food to feed all provinces, a disaster occurs, and the player fills in a skull on his sheet. Then a player must resolve any disasters that occur from the dice rolls. If there are any skull faces showing on the dice, a disaster occurs. The type and severity of the disaster depends on how many skulls are rolled. Some will result in adding skulls to the player's sheet, and pestilence will result in skulls added to their opponent's sheets, and barbarians and invasions will result in battles. Speaking of battles, now is the time when battles will occur, either because of barbarians or invasion, or by the player choosing to invade a neighbouring tribe through conquest or a tribute demand. When a player goes to battle, he compares his military force versus the total of the invading force. For instance, in the case of barbarians, the player compares his total number of armies plus any bonuses for the development's formation and navy versus the invading force total of 4. If the player has a greater number, he wins and fills in tribute boxes equal to the difference. He will also lose 1 army. If a player rolls the conquest face on the Fate die, he may choose to conquer and gain tribute. The player compares his number of armies versus his total number of conquest boxes. If the number of armies is greater, the player gains a number of tribute equal to the difference, fills in 1 conquest box, and loses an army. If a player rolls a tribute demand on the Fate die, he may gain tribute for each weaker opponent. He compares his total armies, including bonuses, against each opponent's total armies, including bonuses. If the player's total is greater than his opponent's, he will gain tribute equal to the difference. If the opponent chooses, he may give 1 good. The player will now gain 1 good instead of the tribute. After battles, it's time for the civilizations to expand. The player may now spend population and goods to build ports, provinces, and monuments. A port requires 1 population plus goods equal to its number of outlined urn symbols. If a player has more ports than provinces, he will gain another Empire die to roll on future turns. A province only requires population. Once the player has filled in all boxes for a province, he will gain armies, as well as the indicated tribute. If the number of provinces is now greater than the number of ports, the player will receive another empire die to roll on future turns. Monuments also require only population to build. Once all boxes for a monument are filled, the player circles the larger number next to it. All other players must now mark off that number. They may only gain the smaller number if they later complete the monument. These points are tallied at the end of the game. Players may now buy one development. These innovations will give the player a boon on future turns. A player may spend goods, use innovation results, each worth 3, or stored wealth, each worth 5, to match or equal the cost on his sheet. The purchase development and any development purchased in a previous round will modify the game on the player's future turns. Finally, a player can store goods as wealth. A player can convert 4 goods into 1 wealth, which will be used to buy developments. Depending on the game length chosen at the start, the game will end when one player either exceeds the determined number of developments or gains a certain amount of tribute, or when a certain number of monuments are built. Players then tally scores, adding points for each monument and development built, plus any bonus scores for certain developments and remaining wealth, and 1 point for each tribute gained. Players then subtract 1 point for each skull filled in under disasters. The player with the highest score is triumphant, and their empire reigns supreme in the Iron Age. Roll Through the Ages, the Iron Age, adds exciting new levels of variety and depth to the Roll Through the Ages system. Pledge now and see if you have what it takes to victoriously lead your people through this glorious age in history.